Hi and welcome back. We're going to be talking about two different ideas. One of them is the transference of ideas from the rough draft to the final copy, as well as how to implement comics within your curriculum once you are done with the project. Thanks again, hope you enjoy. Hi there and welcome back again. Now we're taking a look at the actual transference of ideas. We're transferring ideas now from the rough draft to the final copy. Okay, so as your students are going through this, a few things that they're going to encounter. One, hey, we're taking ideas or information from this little box, and now I have to put it into an even smaller box, or now I have to put it into an even larger panel. Your students are going to have to solve those issues and think critically. So you're definitely going to want to give them ideas. Some ideas, maybe if they have a really large panel, you might be able to have them do a zoom in on the character, so it's looking right at maybe the face, or a specific action or piece of their story. Also, if it's another really large panel, you might want to have them create a split panel and put two ideas and maybe combine or elaborate a little bit more on their story. So basically, as they're transferring information from the rough draft to the final copy, what's going to happen here is I tend to do this in 3 phases. We've already gone through all of the editing, so now this is the publishing portion of the project. First step, I have my students draw out all of the panels. So they're only drawing, they're not writing any dialogue, they're not writing any spoken words whatsoever. Only drawing. So they're drawing the characters, they're drawing the settings, the backgrounds, all of the small detail work. Maybe day 1, draw panels 1 through 5. That's the goal. Day 2, panels 6 through 10. Day 3, 11 through 15, and so on until all of the drawings are done. This portion here takes slightly more time than the inking. The inking they might be able to do in 2 days. Depending on your grade level of student, if you have a lower grade level, what I've seen in the past and what's worked very well, have your students write out the dialogue in the form of a pencil. So you want to have them write it with a lead pencil. Then create the dialogue bubble, of course. After they do that, you want to have them go back over the pencil and trace over it with a pen with black ink. The black ink tends to make it stand out quite a bit and makes it look slightly more professional. If you have an older age group of students, you can just skip the pencil work and have them write straight in with the ink. So you can kind of skip that part depending on the age level of your students. So younger students, pencil first for dialogue, then the ink. Older age level, go straight to the inking and save yourself a little bit of time. Also, something really important that needs to be emphasized, because you'll see it in a few students who weren't paying attention. You want to emphasize here. When I say emphasize, I mean like overly emphasize the idea during the inking. Write the dialogue first, then create the bubble around it. Or write the dialogue, then create the box that goes around it. That's a really key, and it's an integral part in making the published portion look more finalized, and it makes it look more professional. After that, this is the portion that takes the longest amount of time. It tends to be the coloring. There's so much detail work here that's involved, and you definitely want to spend a little bit of time talking about colors. Perfect time to introduce a color wheel, primary colors, your different contrasting colors there. Also, talk about coloring techniques. Like, you shouldn't be coloring this way and this way and this way. It should all be going in one direction back and forth. This way it makes it look very neat. Again, remind your students they're working on a published final version of their comic, so you want to make it look as professional as possible again. So again, real quick review, these are the 3 steps to the rough draft. We start off with the drawing, draw out all of the panels. After that, if you have a younger age group, you want to have them go through, create the dialogue, all of it in pencil. After that, trace the letters in ink, erase the pencil so that the pencil marks are gone. Now you only see the ink. If you have an older age group, you want to have them just, if possible, move straight into the inking. No need to use a pencil. During the coloring portion, you want to have review with your students some different ideas or techniques for coloring. Mainly, don't color in all different directions, because then the work doesn't look as good as it could possibly have looked. This is essentially the idea as to how to transfer the ideas and all of the rough draft into a final product. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll be moving right along with the next part, which is how to implement and integrate more comics within your curriculum once you have finished the actual comic book project itself, or the comic experience. Thank you. Hi, how's it going, guys? Right now I'd like to get into what do you do once the comic experience is done. You know, you finished it in your class. How do you begin to integrate comics now? Granted, the training's pretty good. Also, you've learned quite a bit about the actual process of creating a comic. Your students have too. But now, you know, you're done with the project. What do you do with it now? A few ideas for you, and these are a few of my favorite. The first one I want to talk about is comic storytelling. Just because your students have already developed a story that consists of 35 panels. They're telling a story. So now, a way of changing that a little bit, if you recall the story that I told of Mrs. Chicken and Mrs. Alligator, or Mrs. Crocodile, I always mix those two up. Anyways, if you recall that story, basically I told it from a storyteller's perspective. You would now want your students, after having created their comics, to do the same thing. Now maybe they're acting more of the parts out. They're dramatizing it. That's the whole idea. And you're giving your students a very different venue. Now, instead of working with the visual arts, we're getting into more of the theater realm and the acting out of it. Another idea you can definitely do, because this is more of storytelling, as if I was telling a story, so it's kind of one person. This portion of it here, getting into a comic skit now, maybe they take a few of their panels and create a really short skit with a partner about what their story was about. Maybe they're going to act out or dramatize one part of their comic. So those are two ideas. One of them of comic storytelling, another comic skit. A third idea would be to use comics as a means of assessment. So every week I give my regular history test, my regular science test. The last question on the test is to create a one-panel comic about something that you learned from within the content or within the lesson. That's one way of integrating comics as assessment. Another way, maybe create a real quick handout with 4 panels on it, the boxes, and say, I'd like for you to describe in the form of a comic this idea or this topic or this content. And you can use that as an alternate assessment instead of some of the regular things that we do. And one of my favorite ideas, this pertains more so to reading. So say you're a history teacher or a science teacher, or maybe you're just reading through a story with your students. What I like to do is grab a sheet of paper, fold it so that I get 8 little panels on it, have my students trace the lines real quick. Now we've got a sheet of paper with 8 panels on it. We'll read, say, a few pages, maybe a page or 2. After that, okay, we've read a page, we've read 2 pages, we've discussed it a little bit. I'd like for you to create real quickly a one-panel comic about what's going on with these 2 pages, or what's going on with this, or what stands out most to you. Okay, so we read another 2 pages. I'd like for you to create another panel about these 2 pages. What stands out most to you, or just something that you learned, or an idea, or maybe the next sequence portion of the story. And do that until you get to the very end. So you finished it. Now your students have sequenced out a whole lesson, or they've sequenced out an entire story. Now, if you really wanted to get more bang for your buck, you can have your students get into lines of communication or the Virginia Wheel and have them share what they've gone through. A slightly different way of doing that. Now you could play the mingle game. Remember, it was a mingle, 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 2, and then your students would get into a group of 2. And during this time, they're mingling around the classroom. And once you say 2, they'd get into their group of 2, maybe share one panel from your comic. Then you'd get right back to it. A mingle, mingle, mingle. And I would say number 5. My students would get into a group of 5. Okay, within the group of 5, everyone's going to share one panel that they created about their comic. And as they're doing that, everyone else in the group is listening, only one person is speaking. Do it all over again. A mingle, mingle, mingle. One. They're by themselves at this point, or by themselves. I would just have them read out one of their panels out loud. So I have a bunch of random ideas and random topics being stated all at once. And that's essentially how to integrate comics once you have finished the entire process. So there's storytelling. Your students have already created a story. Now they can begin to actually state it or tell it from a storyteller's perspective or point of view. You can have your students create a quick skit about a scene in their comic, or maybe about their whole comic. If you wanted to one-up that, maybe you could get into some technology stuff, have them record the skits, edit it, do all of that good stuff. You can use comics as an alternate means of assessment. You can get into the comic book fold, which is another great way of just another graphic organizer to have your students sequence information. Alrighty, thank you very much. We've gone through quite a bit here. I hope you've enjoyed all of it. Hi there and welcome back. This is the end of it all here. As you're taking a look right now, you'll see this is essentially a list of everything that we've gone through. We started off with the Virginia Reel. That was having your students get into two lines that were facing each other. You'd give them a topic, they'd talk about it. A few ideas for you. You can definitely implement that with getting your students to revise each other's work. Again, Virginia Reel, also known as lines of communication. After that, we got into setting a personal goal. Then basically, what did you want to get out of this training or professional development? After that, why is this important? That's just something you can use with your students on a regular basis. The very next thing we got into was the MMR PS game, Massive Multiplayer Rock, Paper, Scissors. And during that game, you had your students playing the rock, paper, scissors game. You reviewed the rules with them, the steps, and then we got into making it educational using vocabulary that was based on the comic experience. After that, we got into talking about the 5 component strands of the visual arts. I did teach you a peg system, so 1 is tree, 2 is switch, 3 is stool, 4 is car, 5 is glove. And then we created the links for those to the component strands. From there we got into a creative revision with Play-Doh. You had your students create something, change it, edit it. After that they left it on their paper. Students got into a gallery walk. They were able to walk around and see what other students had created. It was going on in complete silence. And as this was going on, you were just kind of hanging out, watching what was going on. From there they moved right into their quick reflection with the 3-step reflection with what, so what, now what. From there we moved into the rough draft and the final project. I did review the 3 different components there. 1, start with the drawings. 2, after the drawings you want to move on to the inking. From the inking you wanted to move on to the coloring portion. From there we spoke about integrating comics. 1 was with assessment, another one was with creating a comic skit, another was with storytelling, and another was with the sheet of paper that had 8 panels and using it to sequence stories or ideas, using it more along the lines of a graphic organizer. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed it all. We'll have plenty of other things coming up for you on this website. Take it easy, and I hope you enjoyed all of it. If you've got any questions or comments, don't feel free actually to leave any comments on our message boards. And thank you very much again. Have a wonderful day.